Halito, and welcome to Native Chalk Talk, a podcast by natives for all. Here we're keeping our Native ancestors' stories and history alive, while also sharing with you our Native culture, traditions, and more. I'm Rachel Youngman, a Choctaw originally from Anadarko, Oklahoma. I hope you'll enjoy this journey with me as we learn from our Native American guests. And I hope you'll do me a favor. Feel free to like and share these episodes. I so appreciate it. Yakuki.
I feel a sense of urgency literally every single day. I'm always encouraging people, hey, record your ancestors, capture as many stories as possible so that we can keep those things alive for generations to come.
See and share our stories at togetherwe'remore.com.
They were the lords of the plains, the Comanche or the Numunuh, meaning the people. And they guarded their lands of now Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado, and New Mexico. They were the best of horsemen, skillfully utilizing their highly trained horses as tools in battle. The government had tasked settlers with building forts throughout Texas directly in the heart of Comanche territory, anticipating that these settlers would make progress towards colonization. But the Comanches were raiders against those who encroached on their land, attacking and killing settlers and taking captives. In one such raid of Fort Parker, a 9-year-old blonde-haired girl named Cynthia Ann Parker was taken and was eventually made wife to Chief Peta Nocona. Amongst the Comanche arose the great warrior, Quanah Parker of the Quahada band, meaning antelope eaters, born to Cynthia Ann and her chief husband. This warrior would someday lead the tribe not just in battle, but also in surrender. When the U.S. government broke the terms of the Treaty of Medicine Lodge, Quanah's band fought back, resulting in the Red River Indian War, the final major conflict between the government and the Southern Plains Indians. Quanah knew that if they didn't surrender, the Comanche people would be wiped out forever. And so he and the Comanche, led by Quanah, surrendered at Fort Sill in 1875. And because he was both native and white, Quanah attempted to bridge the gap between the two parties. He was also instrumental in coercing other bands to surrender as well. Although he wasn't elected chief by his people, Quanah was appointed by the government as the principal chief of the Comanche Nation. Quanah settled in Cache, Oklahoma, and in 1902, he was elected as Lawton's deputy sheriff. Quanah died in 1911 at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. He and his mother, Cynthia Ann, are buried there at Chief's Knoll on the base, along with other Comanche, Kiowa, and Apache, who were also considered prisoners of war. After his death, his title of chief was replaced with chairman. Quanah's legacy of leadership, kindness, and education and strength are carried on today in his children, grandchildren, and as we'll see today, even his great-grandchildren. To them, he was the loving grandfather who wished his descendants would carry on the Comanche traditions. And for the rest of us, he is known as the last chief of the Comanche. Ladies, I welcome you today to Native Chalk Talk. Thank you so much for joining me. In the first part of this series, I met with Jody Colbert, great-great-granddaughter of Quanah Parker, who is the founder of War Chief Collection, a company that produces flavorful, non-alcoholic wine and beer, and whose name was inspired by the great War Chief, Quanah Parker. Jody, welcome back.
Hi, Rachel. Thank you for having me here today.
Now, this is Women's History Month when we're recording this, so having all these women together is just incredible. My day is just made being able to sit with you ladies here today. Talk a little bit more about that and your inspirations for War Chief.
Well, my inspirations came from a dream. But before I start, I want to honor my elders, my mentors, my aunties. They had opened their arms to me, and I feel a lot of love, and that also is a part of my recovery. As we had talked in the first episode, my Auntie Lenora here that took me in as her daughter. I have been clean and sober for 8 years. September 27th in 2015, that's when I have surrendered myself to the Lord and to our Dapa. And I believe that Quanah Parker, our grandfather, has been with me the whole way. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for him. And if it wasn't for him to come in my dream and to give me those visions, to bring it into real life, and to be a part of what I call victory. is bringing in the non-alcoholic beverages.
Absolutely. And so it sounds like you've been able to combine the love you have from your family with your passion for wanting to help others who are going through recovery and moving on and trying to find solutions to help others. So, Jody, thank you for being here. Now, you and I talked about having your aunties on the show, and your Uncle Don today is also joining us. I'm so grateful that you're all here. Don is going to join us now, so we'll see you in a little bit, Jody.
Okay,
Thanks
you.
again. So welcome, Dawn, to the show. We're so excited to have you here. So why don't we go around a little bit and share about your name, what town you live in, your relation to Quanah Parker, and you're also welcome to share a little bit about yourselves if you would. Sandra, we'll start with you.
My name is Sandra Chestnut. I'm from Cache, Oklahoma. I'm a retired school teacher of 39 years in Cache Public Schools, and I was there for 39 years.
Wow.
39 long years.
You survived them and they survived you.
I was challenged to get my education from my older sister, Miss Jaquetta, because she did her bachelor's, her master's, and her PhD, and I followed her on my bachelor's and master's, and we were at OU together, and I said, sister, I'm not going to never do that next one. I'm going home. I'm going home. But education was really important to my father. He challenged each of his 11 children to go to school. And it was from her example and my dad's challenge that I did get my education. And I'm grateful for that.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Sandra. How about you, Artis?
My name is Artis Parker Lemming, and I'm the sixth child of a huge family. Jaquetta and Sandra are both my older siblings, and they've always been really encouraging. They set a good example, especially when it comes to education. And we really were inspired by Quanah and how he wanted to bring education to all of the Indian children and to his descendants, like my father. And so we're really proud that we're descendants of Quanah. And I can remember when we had the Indian school, the location that was donated by Quanah. And I can remember the transition of leaving that mission school to the public school. And it was real sad to me to have to leave that school. But that's about the education. But I live in Sulphur, Oklahoma, and I'm married to Glenn Lemming, and we raise buffalo. So we have a teepee in our yard, so I get to enjoy all of the culture things and just think about our people while we eat and visit in that teepee and raise the buffalo and enjoy the food from it.
Ardith, I had no idea you raised buffalo. That's fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing. How about you, Don? Tell us a little about yourself.
My name is Don Allen Parker, and I was also encouraged to get a college degree for both Sandra and Jaquetta, primarily Jaquetta. I've had my shares of life's ups and downs, but somehow God has always made it through for me. And my sister encouraged me to go to school, get a degree, because I make such a mess out of my life. And I stayed with her. She taught me how to take notes, because I didn't know how to take notes. And anyway, it was just a privilege, an honor to have sisters that are encouraging, and they also encourage you in the Lord. And I'm just so thankful for the church and the upbringing we had. Although I can tell you so much about the Native American church, which maybe we can save for a later date. But I was also very active because Quanah, he gave our people two choices: the Road or a Peyote Way. And he just had that insight. And I'm thankful that our churches gave us that time to be raised there in church.
Absolutely. Thank you, Don. How about you, Lenora? Let's hear about your background and how you were related to Quanah Parker.
I am also a great-granddaughter of Quanah Parker. My name is Lenora Parker, and I was also influenced by the history of Quanah Parker from my father. He always spoke about Quanah Parker and his leadership, And my father was always interested in learning, and he was fluent in Comanche and English and very proficient in both. So my father told me to go as high as I could. And so I have spent many years in tribal leadership. I enjoyed every minute serving the people. And Quanah Parker was my role model, as well as my father. He helped a lot of people in the community, as well as my mother. And we were influenced greatly and helped along our life by the Mennonite Brethren Church, also in our neighborhood. So I feel very blessed that I come from a strong family and that we in this generation can continue to share our stories, and hopefully it'll encourage other Native Americans and young people in our tribe. So I'm very honored to be here to share our story. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, how about you, Jaquetta? Tell us about yourself and your background.
My name is Quanah Parker McClung. I'm the oldest child of my mother and my father. I also had a stepbrother and stepsister older than I was, and we were always close, all of us. So that's all 13.
All 13.
My mother and dad, 11, 12, yeah. And my mother and dad, I was the oldest child. I had 5 brothers and 5 sisters. Now all the sisters are still living. And as of this last month, we're now going to be all close together in this part of the Oklahoma or Cache area. And we have one brother, and he's here with us today. Makes me want to cry. But we're so happy to have him. And we had to pick him up because we said he's the most knowledgeable, because he knows a lot about the Native American religion. And he also knows a lot about the Protestant religion. And so because he took that interest in both, now he's teaching us. And so I'm so happy that he came today.
We'll be back after this quick break. Are you in the medical field looking for your next opportunity? Listeners, I'm proud to introduce you to Native American veteran-owned staffing company, Worldwide Medical Staffing. Owner and CEO Jackson Weaver is a citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma and is a service-connected disabled veteran, where he and his team staff for commercial healthcare and government entities such as the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, and DHS, and specialize in staffing Indian Health and VA hospitals nationwide. Isn't it nice to know that our veterans are being cared for by staff who have been handpicked by a veteran who's been in the staffing business for 17 years? Healthcare job seekers, check out these open jobs on www.medical.com. If you're seeking temporary, long-term, or permanent placement of physicians, advanced practice, registered nurses, and more, check out www.medical.com. And Diakoki to our medical professionals and to those who have served our country.
Well, as I said, and you've already heard the sisters say, that Quanah's, one of his visions was for his people to be educated. In my mind, I've always wondered, what did he think? What did he think? You know, how could he see that far down the road? But he was visionary, as Don said, visionary, and he gave us a choice of the education. He gave us a choice of the spiritual part of us, and he said, you know, he told the missionaries, and Don will tell you when we get to that we'd given the money, the land for the church, but they had to build a school. So we could go to a school, and he started another school district. So you could go to the school, parochial school, or you could go to the regular school. Mm-hmm. Of course, I went to the parochial school. When we get to that part, I'll tell you about that, going to that parochial school. But I would say it's his decision that really set my future in place, and my brothers and sisters too, because we went that way, and we did as we saw the vision that he saw. My dad saw the vision that he saw. Lenora's dad saw. They all saw it and knew that that's where we should go in order to be successful in his life. But if you read the article that my brother wrote, he's 1 foot in each world, mm-hmm. and I think that's what I got out of it. You have to have 1 foot in each world. That we have to earn a living. We have to raise our children in the world it is today, but we also have to remember where we came from and remember our culture. There's one thing about my dad that I really appreciate, that he said that we must always remember our ancestors, always remember Quanah.
And that's where oral history becomes very important. And I always remember every Christmas, he would take us, he'd put the teepee up, and then he'd take us all in there, all of his children around that fire. And that's the one time of the year we had to bare our souls. We could ask for forgiveness, or we could tell our plans for the future, whatever it was that we could bring to that circle, like a circle of life. And that's the way we were raised. So we were very active in the church and the Mennonite Brethren missionaries, and then we were also active with helping Dad to keep our culture alive. So I just remember one quick story. Someone said, "Why did y'all become Mennonites?" You think of the Amish Mennonites.
Oh, right.
I said, we're black. We drive cars. And I said, but I said, they were just the first missionaries that wanted to establish a mission. And so they came out this way, which to them was a long way away, like overseas is now. And they established this mission under the supervision, I guess, of Quanah Parker. So that's how we became missionaries, Mennonites. I said, they were just the first missionaries. That's all I know. But
Right.
Anyway,
I wondered that.
I clarified that the doctrine is very similar to Baptist.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
I remember when I was going to teach at Clemson University, I thought, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Where do I go? And the district minister said, don't worry about it, Jaquetta. Just find a good Baptist church and they won't even rebaptize you.
I love all these pieces of information about each one of you, and you all have that special feeling towards Quanah and how he, really influenced your lives, it seems. Now, Lenora, you used to work at Riverside Indian School, where my dad used to work. Tell us about that.
I worked at Riverside Indian School for 18 years. I was a dorm supervisor. I supervised 8 Native American women and 100 girls every year. And so that was a wonderful experience. I'm glad I got to work there because I thought about my own mother and father when they were in Indian school. They didn't have much support or encouragement. So I chose to be there to help support the young people. They came from 70 reservations. And I learned from them also. We had many cultures, many languages, dances, and songs. So it added to my education as a Native, and I learned to appreciate all the other tribes and their ceremonies. And so it was still to this day, it was a blessing then, and it's still a blessing in my memory because I made a contribution. I was there, I was hands-on, and I was able to share a lot of my own wellness in my own life and give it away to the young people and teach them about life skills, self-esteem. Self-esteem is the greatest deterrent against drugs and alcohol. So I ran my dorm with the spiritual foundation and treated the kids with respect, and they gave it back to us. And we had many successes. They are called, or I don't want to say called, they may have been labeled as at risk, which means at risk to fail. But we never used that term. We supported them and encouraged them, and we developed a lot of kids that made the honor roll. They became athletes, and a lot of them set their goals for their future. So we did have great success there. And so I'm real proud of that I was able to help Native American youth. That was the majority of my my career.
The thing about Dad and
Yeah,
Fort Sill
go ahead.
Indian School, our dad went to Fort Sill Indian School. He's just funny telling his stories. People will tell you sad stories about Fort Sill Indian School, but others did not. And my dad didn't. Of course, he was disciplined and all that. But it was so funny. He'd say, they'd take us up there in our wagon and horses and our little bags. And we'd go up to Fort Sill Indian School, and Mom and Dad would drop us off, and somebody else's family would drop them off. And then they'd turn around and head back, and some of them boys would just go around them and beat them home.
Oh,
They ran away from Riverside and beat their parents home. That was a good experience because he learned how to bake, he learned how to cook, and one of his first jobs was there at Fort Sill Indian School cooking for the kids.
I was just thinking about the poetry that Dad wrote.
Oh, yeah.
He wrote one for
Each
Jim
child.
and Mom, for each of us, and one for for all of us. I have a book of his poems that he wrote.
Right now, we'll talk about Choni. So Quanah had 8 wives at one point, and again, we'll get into that in just a moment. But Choni was the wife he married in 1868, and that's who you all descend from, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Parker Sr. was our grandfather, and Quanah Parker Jr. was our father.
And
Okay,
Simmons.
my dad was their brother. They were brothers.
The 4 of you all have Baldwin Jr. as your dad, and then Lenora has
Simmons.
okay, as her father, but they were brothers. So,
Yes, they were
so you're a
best friends.
cousin of these
Yeah.
folks. Okay, gotcha. So I know this is a broad question, but what was Quanah like?
He was a fierce warrior.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was trained at a real young age. You know, I think I read we're at 5 years old. You know, he was already riding bareback horses. You know, and he could just, you know, he was a good mounter. He could ride fast, and he practiced shooting bows and arrows. You know, when he was really, really quite young, and when he was the other tribesmen, the other men in the tribe were very impressed. You know, with how well he did at everything that he did as far as, you know, riding horses, and, you know, very
Right.
early they spotted him as being a good warrior.
They knew he had it in him.
I think of him from a later stage in life. And that's, I guess it has to do with the Mennonites, like Don said, when we became church, and the things that I learned from them, but also from them about church, but the things I learned from the missionaries about him. And so that's where I get a lot of my oral history. And he was, as the books say, he was kind. He was generous. When someone came through, he would kill a beef and load them up with it so they could be on their way.
Amazing.
He could invite, and you could stay at his home. Although, you know, he had all them wives and all those children. I thought about where did they sleep, but I don't know.
That's a good question. Where did they
But
sleep?
anyway, he was just very kind, compassionate, but at the same time, Don always tells this story about he was stern with his son-in-laws. He didn't tell him what to do.
Oh,
You know, he told you what to do. So he's sort of like a two-person man.
yeah.
You know, he was kind and compassionate and considerate and visionary, but at the same time, he was a very strong leader. So one of my oral ladies was a lady named Annie Gomez. She came to the Mennonite Brethren Mission as a 17-year-old girl to help the missionaries with their children. She stayed all of her life. So all of her life meant that Sandra and I don't know about Ardith, but Sandra and I, we were in her Sunday school class. We learned a lot about her. But she was also the leader to us in our women's organization, Magdalena Circle.
Magdalena.
She was and she would set examples for us. For example, you know, Sandra and I and Ardith are just adamant that everything is done the night before. And her words were, when the people come, they want to be impressed that you just are already, you're not running around looking ragged. So
Right.
when we had women's conference, we stayed up half the night, make sure everything was set and done, as to be ready. And she likened that to be ready for the Lord. You know the story of those lanterns? You know, they took their oil, and some of them forgot to take them. Well, we don't want to be like that. We want to be ready. And then she said about Quanah that there was a point in her life when Quanah needed help workers, when he was serving the dignitaries that came to his house around that big table in his dining room. So he needed help. So he wanted Annie go. He must have liked Annie, but he wanted Annie Godos to come and help him work for him. And she served. You know, she served and set tables and did all kind of things for him. And I think about this man. She wasn't even ashamed to tell us this, because he said, you know what he said to me? And we said, what did he say? He said, Annie, she was a little short German lady, you know, and I don't know how her hair was. Not sure what he said. Annie, you're very ugly. Quanah told her. He said, you must always dress up and make yourself look nice. And Annie said, I never went out there without just primping up every which way, looking as good as I can. Because to him, being a fair-skinned lady, you know, being a shorter lady, and maybe not having long braids, that I was ugly. And I just did everything I could to make that a good service, and he always had her back.
Annie, you're ugly, okay?
Anyway, so he was like, I don't
think he meant that to be humorous. I think humorous. He was serious, but in a good way. You know, always look your best. But you think about him, sisters and brother. He always looked his best. If you see him in his pictures, he was dressed to the T. Always dress up, right, Lenora, and look good out there. You shouldn't just be sloppy and everything. So we learned to be, I should say, attentive to our attire and how we looked. Unless my hair's done, my makeup's on, I had earrings on.
That's a Quanah Parker legacy.
Yeah, that's a legacy from our grandmother.
Right, and I hope you don't mind my putting you on the spot, but when I asked Jaquetta what size T-shirt she wore so I could give her a Native Choctaw T-shirt, she said, "I don't wear T-shirts." Because Quanah taught you, through the lineage to dress up nice.
Didn't wear T-shirts. They had those dresses and apron, a pizquina as we called it, sash, and they dressed too, and their braids were so
beautiful.
I don't wear T-shirts, and in fact, nobody probably did in those days. But the point of it is that we as sisters now, we're really adamant, and she is too. She always looked hot, boy. And Donnie too. When he goes out, he always has on a ribbon shirt. He didn't wear a T-shirt out to any of these activities.
Yeah.
You know, we could have learned that from our parents, but I always think of Quanah. And when you look at those pictures, you always think, boy, he was a striking man.
He definitely was a striking, and he was tall, right?
Yeah. Well,
How tall do you think he was?
Tall. He wasn't real tall.
Oh, okay.
Comanches weren't real tall people.
He was taller than the normal Comanche. He was like 6 foot.
He looks he had such a presence in his pictures. You know? Yeah.
He not only set an example, but he also encouraged his daughter that went to Indian school, his favorite daughter, he encouraged her to wear, to special occasions, to wear her buckskin dress.
Oh, wow.
You know, instead of going to buy her something else like a American dress or he would say, "No, you wear your buckskin dress."
Art did wear her buckskin because she does it too.
Oh.
She'll put on her buckskin dress if it I
Didn't your husband make you a dress or something?
Yes, he braided hands.
Okay.
And he made me two dresses and a jacket.
Oh, that's so nice.
He makes everything. Moccasins. He made moccasins before we ever got married. So somebody said, he really cares about you.
And his personality, Quanah's, was the love for his mother.
Oh,
you know, and in the books, it's true that he did petition the Texas legislature to allow him to go into Texas, exhume her body, and bring it back. He wanted to bring her back to her place. And that's what he did. But what I remember most was, and I had this picture at one time, but we went to church at the little Mennonite church, you know, up there, and the stage was raised up maybe about that high. It wasn't real big, but when he brought her body, that he took her body and washed the bones of her body. And then he put it in a little casket. And I have a picture of it. You too, Art, you might have it, of a casket, her in a little white casket, looked like a baby casket, up there on the stage, and sat with her all night. Because it wasn't our custom to sit with the body all night long, have wakes, you know, and sing and pray. But he sat with her. But the thing that touched me the most was him washing her bones.
That's beautiful.
I know. It really showed how much he loved his mother. That's the thing why he took her name. Her name was Parker. And so he took that name to honor his mother.
That's amazing.
I wish one of my boys let me not to take my name.
He was like 15 years old when she was taken from him. And we'll talk about that whole part of the story as well. I would assume that from there on, he just missed her, wanted to have her back in his life. And he did go looking for her at some point, right? Like he was putting feelers out there to go, where is my mother?
What I was going to say about Quanah Parker, I believe he was one of the most photographed Native Americans in his time period. And that story she told about him washing his mother's bones, I did not know that story, but that's the impression I've always had of him, that he was a man that loved his people, and he devoted his whole life to leading the Comanches. And he had perseverance, and he was a great humanitarian. That's what I learned from my dad. When my dad talked about him, I thought about how he loved the people. That always came through.
But you know, when he was at Fort Sill, they kind of like made him the principal chief or something over all the other tribes. So I would say that his love was for the Comanche, but he also loved
a lot of other people. Those other people, he took care of them. And I have a quick funny story about Annie Gomez telling us about how they had the agent, and they had everybody's name, enrollment and stuff like that, and who you were related to. So it was an enrollment book. But anyway, so Quanah, they didn't know what to do because some of these names like Tachawika or Wumavoya, were so long they had room to put it in. He would say, he'd get that guy over there like Tachawika, and he'd say, Heights, friend, Heights, your name's too long. Name's too long. We're going to have to cut it in half so we could get it. And Anna gave me an example of one of those guys that they did cut their name off. And I thought, that's how they got their name. Heights.
That's how you get your name.
That story came from Annie Gomez.
It's interesting that you got to learn a lot about Quanah from the missionaries.
Yes, from them and the people that we lived, and the elders, not just Anna, but other elders that knew him. And I guess he was funny. But we have, with the oral history that Don talks about, and even the funny stories I hope he tells today, that it's so far back, unless it was passed down orally, when you didn't have it, you just had those movie story tales.
Stay tuned for part 2 of this series.
Thanks for listening to Native Chalk Talk. Be sure to join our community on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and check us out at nativechalktalk.com. Stay tuned for the next episode. You're going to love it. Yakoki. Thank you, my friends.